All right. And yeah, we are back with some Darksiders playthrough. Um, we get the scene up. Gonna go ahead and get the game going. Oh, okie dokie. Gotta figure out why it keeps doing that. Some reason it keeps changing the channel, the audio channel. Uh, 1 second. And then we'll get back to it. Dude. Huh.
Hello everybody, welcome to my latest video. You're probably wondering why I'm doing a video on Inquisitor Martyr, and indeed the question arises, why am I still playing Inquisitor Martyr after 7 years? Well, first off, I became number 1 for Glory last week, which is quite impressive, but that aside, I want to go into some of the really good things about this game. I have been quite negative about this recently, and I've tried to dial that back. I will cover off why. I don't justify being negative about games. I'm usually positive to the extreme about particular games and how development works, etc. But I think the reason I've been negative about this is because I do like it so much, and I just get frustrated about certain things. But I'm going to go through why I really enjoy it before I go through that. So, first and foremost, it's an isometric ARPG, which a lot of them already know. And isometric ARPGs are my favourite genre of game.
Okay.
Now,
Good deal.
It's not the only genre I enjoy, but it is my favourite genre, so that of course does have something to do with it. Now, if we are to just look at isometric ARPGs in general, there are a number of them out there, and they all do certain things better than others. Diablo, for example, is probably one of the first big league ARPGs, isometric ARPGs I should say, and it coined the phrase Diablo-like, which I suppose is where other like type games came from, such as Souls-like or things like that. But Diablo for a very long time, probably even still now, is the benchmark that most other isometric ARPGs are judged against. And it's probably a little bit harsh, because Diablo in and of itself, in its heyday, even now, back in the early 2000s, Diablo 2. There are still a number of people who prefer to play Diablo 2 Resurrected than Diablo 4, for example. Now, there are a number of other entries in the ARPG sphere, such as Path of Exile, The Last Epoch, Grim Dawn, you name it, that's just a few of them. Inquisitor Martyr is somewhat of an odd standout in that crowd, primarily because A, it's set in the Warhammer 40k universe, which of course I love, and that does help, but also because being such a just makes it one of the only shooters that you can put in that group. Yes, you have mages, yes, you have archers, but you don't really have any guns or things like that in the rest of them, where you have to manage ammo or anything of that nature. Diablo 2 you have to manage ammo. You had Amazons, you had to constantly keep quivers of arrows or bolts in your inventory, and that was something that's even more insane. At least in this one you have unlimited ammo, it's just a clip you have to reload. I think one of the main reasons I do like this is they have, in my opinion, stayed very true to the source material. It kind of does feel like you're in the 44 universe, playing as, well, not a space marine, you are playing as an agent of the Imperium and one of a significantly high standing. That means you have access to a whole entourage of people who, although they don't help you in battle very often, if at all, they are there to perform services on the ship that you have acquired. It's not your ship, but it is well. Now, it kind of does its operations, and that again leads on to the next thing of why this game is so enjoyable. It's very pick up, play, and down. And you could see that as a negative. But this is mission-based. And when I say it's mission-based, it's of the nature that you're on your ship, you select a mission from a list, or enable an intel, for example, within your inventory, and that opens up a mission. Or you can go on this game's version of the raid, which is called a Void Crusade. All of those are things that you choose to do. It's not a case that you're walking into a town and then you walk out the other side and you're all in the same room. These are instance-based, more like an MMO when you go into certain areas. Because of that, it means you can literally jump on just to do one mission and you're back on the ship. The benefit of that is it splits up the game. And I am an absolute nightmare for it, that if I'm playing a story-based game, this does have actually, in my opinion, a very balanced story. If you're in a story-based game, you get that one more minute, so you finish off an objective in the story, and it instantly opens up another thing that you have to do, and because the other thing is just around the corner, you kind of just carry on. And that can lead to some situations where, in my Final Fantasy VII, I ended up playing until 6 o'clock in the morning at times because I just didn't realise how long had gone. In this, you can literally just go, it's 20 minutes before work, I'm going to jump into a mission, finish the mission, turn it off, and go to work. And I have done that on numerous occasions. So that's one reason I like this game. The other is, barring its potential graphical hitches, and I will come to that shortly, I do think it looks actually really nice. It's not the best looking game at all. There are better ARPGs out there now, and I use the term now because this is a 7-year-old game. This was produced in 2018, and it's still looking very nice, if I do say so. There are other games out now, of course, like Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4, which graphically beat this. But again, I think they choose colour palettes which are of a singular style. So what I mean by that is Diablo is colour desaturated, so it's all very earthy colours. You might have some fire, which is quite bright, but it's nowhere near that's bright. With this game, you can see that the icons on the screen with some of the skills and stuff are really bright. The background, the environment, is quite drab, as you would expect from a spaceship, in effect. So I think they've got the art direction well. You can zoom into your character to a certain degree, but you can't necessarily see it very well when you do so. But even so, you can see it on the starting screen as you saw at the very beginning of this video. So you get the normal normal things you find in the game. So you'll get loot points, skill points, attribute points, and things like that. And what I do with this particular game is you not tied into the skills that you use swap your weapons for better damage. The skills are actually tied to your choice. So if you're playing a system of battle like I am, and you decide to use handle and brazier, you have a completely different set of skills than if you choose to use a boxer, as they're called. That because you can have a completely different playstyle between your two different weapons. You can go from walking around as though you're on mage using a flamer and brazier to just using a two-handed weapon, and the weapons themselves can have slots for special abilities. So the hand flamer and the brazier, for instance, has one open skill slot, and that allows you to use special skills that are just for the system of battle, sororitas skills, faith skills, I think. But I have on occasion equipped a two-handed bolt rifle in my second slot, and when I equip that, I no longer have access to my Sisters of Battle skills, so you have a very different playstyle. Now, talking about different playstyles, you also have different types of mission, and it's not just about going around and killing things, although that does heavily kind of feature. It is an ARPG at the end of the day. But you do have assassination missions when the idea is to take out certain creatures. You have purge missions where the idea is to kill everything on the map. You have these destroy the guns missions, or capture the guns. So you have to destroy certain turrets. Siege missions where you have to capture zones. To do that you do have to kill everything in the zone. And you also get data hunts. Now these ones, you can actually complete the mission without killing a thing. You can literally just harness the data. Now, you have to be extremely good and extremely resilient, because you will be attacked while you're harnessing it. But if you don't want to attack back, you don't have to. You just harness the data. There are no just go and fetch me 12 ducks kind of missions you find in MMOs, which I'm kind of glad about, because those things are just ridiculous. But you do get those type of feel, especially when you're doing a data hunt, as I say, where you're literally searching for data. There are also hunt the artifact missions where you are quite literally trying to find an artifact. You have to bypass protection zones or shields, etc. So there are different variations to it. And on those different missions you have different map types as well. So you might have the interior of a ship, which we saw in the last mission that the character was doing. This one is an open air battle zone. You have deserts, and those are more sandbox. So there'll be basically a massive square that you can wander anywhere within that square. There are also on rails ones, ships being one of them, walking down ship corridors at the end of the day. So you're not exactly able to just wander wherever you want, but you can go down any corridor that you do want to go down. You just obviously need to go in a certain direction, unfortunately. Now, obviously, it's an old game. It came out in 2018, as I've said, and there are certain things which they could probably improve on now. So, one of those is there are some graphical glitches on PlayStation, for example, console in general, but PlayStation specifically. One of those is the fact it judders. Now, it's commonly mistaken as being a frame rate problem, but I can categorically say it's not a frame rate problem. I have checked the frame rate and it never dips below 60. I say that, it's gone down to 58 a couple of times, but it stays at 60. What it actually is the background and some of the interactable objects juddering. So it's almost as though the game can't render them fast enough, and it's not a frames per second issue because your character is perfectly fine. It's more the fact that it's utilising memory incorrectly or something like that. I'm not a game designer, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's something to do with how the game's coded compared to the architecture of consoles and PlayStation in general. I know on PC it does need an excessively powerful rig for the graphics to be able to run it at high FPS, for example. So there is something about it. That's not why I feel negative about the game, and I should probably deal with that now. My problem with the game is nothing about the game. My problem with the game is the fact that they
I guess it just automatically gives it
console up to the same
better rounds, huh?
specification and standard as the PC game. And by that I mean they release an update to the PC, a new season, class. You can be waiting nearly 2 years before that comes to console. Now, I get that it's a small developer and it does have a small team. And I get that they don't have to release any of their game at all on any platform. I get it. But one thing about this game is it heavily relies on something called a compendium. And that compendium tells you how to make psalm doctrines, which are basically rune words for this particular game. It tells you that each of the different things in it. It tells you limits. It tells you everything. It's kind of like a law system for the game. It's 90% of the time outdated or completely incorrect for console, because it's telling you about systems that do not exist on the console version. So console players have no way of knowing how to do rune words, for example, if they've added new ones. They have no idea what certain systems mean. So we're trying to find out what's happening in Season 4. PC is almost Season 6. So all of the compendium information is about what is going on in Season 5, which doesn't help, because again it's another, come to this compendium, buy the game. That is my issue with this game. Because of that, it's got to the stage where we're now waiting for the offline. So we do have Season Journey now, which means we can play any season whenever we want, and the character can stay in that season permanently forever, which is brilliant. I love it. We're still waiting for the offline, which basically means if they decide to shut down the Neocore servers, we can still play the game. We can't play it co-op at all, but we can still play it single player. Okay, that's fine. At least we have a game we can still play. One thing they have made the decision about, at least for the time being, is the latest class, the Hierophant class, which is out on PC, is not coming to console. So that means a whole playable class, which brings new mechanics, etc., to the game. They've decided not to release on console. And some people have said it's because console players are so negative about the game, and look, I get it. I have been relatively negative about it as well. But it's because people love the game. If it was kept up to date, at least like a month, 2 months behind even, I think people would have been much more forgiving, and the console players would still be playing the game, like I am. But because 2 years would pass, and having a season where you can complete it that quickly, and then you're stuck playing the same season with another character, but you know that other people are playing a different season, is kind of disheartening. And I think that's the problem. So, now that's out of the way, the game itself, I absolutely love. Yes, there is juddering of the screen, but the way I play, I either look at my character or I look at the enemies. I don't look in front of my character to where I'm running, and that's just the way I play. So maybe that's a bit odd, but I tended not to see the problem with juddering when I first started playing, and people thought I was crazy. It's just the way I play the character and I look at the game as I'm playing. That's it.
Is there not a way
so
to...
it doesn't affect me too much. The
Maybe
way the
just
characters interact,
hit
all
them.
of the mission types, just the general fun of playing the game for me is the reason I keep coming back. And if you enjoy games and you're not really into shooters such as Space Marine 2, or you don't like turn-based games such as Chaos Gate or even Rogue Trader, I would definitely recommend getting this game, especially as it is quite often on sale. What I would say as a kind of a note of warning though, do not get the PS5 version and mistakenly buy the DLC for the PS4 version, because this game does not work cross-generation. Your character saves do, but the DLCs don't.
Oh, I get it. Okay, I get it.
Works, but it does. So, for example, if you have the PS4 version of the game and you buy all of the DLCs for the PS4 version of the game, then you buy the PS5 version of the game, it may seem that all of the DLCs work, but that's because the PS5 version came with all of the original DLCs. And by original, I mean all the way up to the Sororitas class. If you buy the Sororitas class on the PS4, it does not work on the PS5 version. You have to buy it separately. Just bear that in mind, because I made the mistake of buying it on the PS4 version and then playing the PS5 version and realising I had to buy it again. So I actually own the Sororitas class, which is a £16 purchase twice. So just bear that in mind. Anyway, I've probably waffled on long enough about why I like this game and why I think you should play it, but hopefully you can see just from the gameplay and what I've said that it does still, even to this day, have a place in your library, and it's worth dipping back into every now and then, especially now you can play the seasons whenever you want and the characters do stay active, I'm going to say, for as long as you want them to be. So as I say, definitely give it a go if you're into ARPGs or just Warhammer 40k in general, and if you do, and for as long as the servers maintain, do consider adding it to your friends list, and maybe you can jump into a co-op.
Oh shit.
It would be good to play co-op once again. So, there we go. Thank you very much for watching, as always. I really do appreciate it. Please make sure you do click the like button, subscribe if you are new to the channel. Please leave me a comment down below, let me know your thoughts on the game in 2025. Let me know your journey. Let everyone else know your journey, what you think of the game, and please do keep it as nice as you possibly can. I know there are a lot of people who are quite negative, as we've discussed, but do try and keep it as, how should I say, polite as possible. If you're not happy, that's fine. Let's keep it at least so I don't get banned off YouTube, please. But yeah, at the same time, you know, comments are always welcome, so please do comment down below. Right, I'm going to leave it there, and I do look forward to seeing you for my next video very soon. You all take care. Bye for now.
Fast-paced RTS games. That was my first love. Yeah, even before Halo shooters and of course the online RPG and MMORPG virtual world genre most of you know. I detailed this in my StarCraft 2 video, a video that's recommended watch material. Think of this like a mini sequel episode to that, even if the games were leagues apart. I am a StarCraft 1 fanboy through and through, as most of you probably know. But through the fandom, I was connected to virtual worlds in a very interesting way, with the creators of StarCraft 1 being one of the big designers behind Guild Wars 1, making my transition, if you want to call it that, not that uncommon or strange. Why even use the word transition, besides for memes? Well, because we haven't seen that many RTS games, especially since the pre-2010s, making it a less popular and culture zeitgeist genre than even MMORPGs in some ways, and that's saying something these days. Sad. So what am I talking about, Willis? Well, we had another RTS game come and promise to make things right in the world and return the RTS genre to premier glory. Problem is, like many that came before, it didn't happen. Stormgate was highly touted and advertised as being from former StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3 Blizzard developers. Originally announced in the summer of 2022 and would release first in early access 2 years later in 2024, before launching fully August 5th, 2025, just recently as of the time of this video. But Stormgate would raise a ton of attention, even being mentioned by me in my StarCraft 2 video due to a key giveaway, and being hyped by all of the biggest RTS names in the biz even. Within just a few months after each of its launches, even though, would fail to maintain a workable competitive population, let alone a casual one at all. What went wrong with nearly $40 million in budgeting, and how did supposed industry vets fail to impress casual and competitive players alike? On this episode of Death of the Game, a series where we investigate the large contributing factors to the death or dying of a game or company by utilizing a timeline of events filled with clues and bits of evidence we uncover along the way. Pay attention along the way to pick up on any clues as they present themselves. And stay tuned to the end for the final deduction, where the best detectives get to show their moment in the sun and crack the case. Pick your faction detectives. We've got 3 to choose from. Hotkeys to master, in case of some random haters thinking that I wouldn't cover this game for some reason, despite this kind of being my whole gig. And a legacy with a behemoth level shadow to escape. Something mess with the bull, get the horns. The story begins with the founding of Frost Giants, originally founded in 2020 by a couple dozen supposed Blizzard veterans. I say supposed because we only know of the big bill names involved, really, like Tim Campbell, who was a director on Wasteland 3, a CRPG survival style game that I actually really enjoyed, and the campaign designer on Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne. Tim Morton, who was the CEO of Frost Giant, was a former producer on StarCraft 2's Legacy of the Void expansion, now running that company. Finally, we had the likes of James Anhalt, who was a pathfinding engineer on StarCraft 2. And finally, Brett Crawford, who was the lead designer on Heroes of the Storm. It's not saying. And then Cara LaForge, the mother of Day 9 and Tasteless, was the head of business development, having previously worked on StarCraft esports and, of course, at Blizzard. The team had been assembled. Fellowship. All that was left was funding and ideas, especially if you wanted to spend so much time advertising ex-Blizzard as well. How closely associated was StarCraft and Warcraft, 2 incredibly supported and followed games. Something that would be putting pressure on Frost Giant would search for funds in the form of multiple rounds of funding, investment funding, initially being funded by the likes of Kona Venture Partners and Global Founders Capital, a venture capital style funding. Series A was called presenting better series and some more complex requirements. Their other investments would come largely from Kakao Games, Riot Games, and Bitcraft Ventures. This would bring up their initial funding to around $34.7 million at the time pre-launch. Now let's cut to the chase. Money was going to be needed to make a game. But a game wasn't the only thing being advertised. This was an upcoming Unreal Engine 5 RTS that was being made by the developers behind StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3, shown front and center. Or at least this strategy only has 2 outcomes. Bring in all the hype, then get that sweet StarCraft money after that, or you rumble in the shadow of the nemesis that you chose to summon yourself, and steer into it for hype revenue generation. It's like hearing about Nemesis and Resident Evil and just deciding, you know what, let me go hit this guy up. Despite claims of $100 million, StarCraft 2's budget has not really ever been clearly reported, and Blizzard has been tight-lipped on those costs, alongside Warcraft 3. But we can make some assumptions based on some other budgets that we have some ideas of. Like Age of Empires 3, an RTS, of course, in the Age of Empires series, which had around a $20 million budget. Adjusted for inflation, that would make their budget about $33 million today, which would mean a game from 2005 has the same budget as a game that was trying to be the next AAA RTS in the 2020s. While things could work, if Frost Giant wasn't smart with their direction as a company, and the direction of their upcoming RTS game, they could run out of money before even getting to the finish line or shortly after. This was exacerbated because now people had expectations you were going to be better, or at least on par with StarCraft 2, Age of Empires 4 now, and Warcraft 3, and of course some of your competitors like Age of Empires 4. And let's just be honest, any opportunities to steer away from this, Frost Giant just ignored. You lay your bed. Such as even claiming your new RTS that was Stormgate after public announcement of June 2022 was made in response to needs that StarCraft 2, like co-op. Tim Morton would even claim Stormgate's focus was on social play, too. This social play was by attacking the game content world from all angles, building a competitive game with a tournament system built in, a co-op system, and a custom game system, of course. This was the same formula that StarCraft 1 and later on Warcraft 3 would follow, which led to their immense successes. but even the IGN writers were asking for something more without necessarily asking for it, right? Talking about how Warcraft had heroes, StarCraft had full concept missions, and what the story would have. If their desire was to be compared to the likes of the games we just mentioned, they were going to have to come correct in all aspects that we've outlined. Only initially showcasing teasings of the second faction alongside the first, the Vanguard. Think like Terran from StarCraft would be the announcement of a second faction in Stormgate, August 2023. This faction seemed very Zerg, with the ability to spread the Shroud instead of Creep, which functioned similar to the Creep in StarCraft. But, first, the Creep or Shroud is far less useful in Stormgate, but we're going to talk about that more later during the gameplay section. Having some similarities from well-known factions or borrowing elements from other RTS games wasn't a bad idea, but it was important Stormgate would develop their own identity as well. Something that would be hard with how much they were leaning into the similarities here. And leaning into similarities was also harming how creative they could be and actually unique they could have each faction play, meaning that many of them played kind of like the same, and there wasn't that much variety in build order. I think putting more connectivity between the world mechanics, heroes, and the powers the game features, which each faction has a set of unique ones, would have helped you, as well as putting more effort into the tooltip lore. And, well, the upcoming campaign, which would be a right proving ground for building the world and lore for the game too. Well, if it was good. While Stormgate would have an early alpha, I wouldn't join the picture. That was in high school sometime in November of 2023. I had signed up to the creator, who is a big fan, gave me an invitation. The early playtesting I got to experience was rough, but so was the alpha testing I did in StarCraft 2. Still rougher in elements like visuals and polish, which kind of should be expected because it's a smaller company, so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. To be honest though, for a closed beta test, a proper one even, I was impressed with the foundation of Stormgate thus far, and thought they could certainly build from it and had a plan to do such. Despite their thousands of millions in funding, however, Stormgate would push to a Kickstarter December 5th, 2023, which is usually a move done by those who have funding to build hobbies and get some community pre-started. It's also fantastic marketing, especially when your project, like inevitably, if properly backed of course, smashes the Kickstarter money amount that you need to. The problems would arise though surrounding the Kickstarter, leading all the way up to the official launch of the game. First, the Kickstarter would talk about how the project was being fully funded, which was a good sign, but would later be proven to not be true when communications director Gerald Valoria stated defensively that the game was funded starting early access. Oops. First, the money maneuvering wouldn't stop there, despite having over 30 million in funding and succeeding on a $2.6 million crowdfunding Kickstarter. Darksiders would apparently need more. They attempted to do this by utilizing an indie website platform Start. They would value their company at $150 million, $26 a share. Not only did this campaign dramatically fail, raising only about $480,000, it would show us that perhaps things weren't as they seemed behind the scenes. How was the company who hadn't launched a product yet already running out of so much money and having so little to show for it, and needing so much more? And why on earth do they seem so delusional already? Stormgate's early access release date would be set for later in the year, in August of 2024. And something didn't really sit right with me in hindsight. Why was a company kickstarted with investor funding launching into early access? You have no idea where the company's actual allegiance lies. It's not the player base, because they have actual investors with investment funding. And then there's the Kickstarter stuff that they have to actually satisfy. And then the early access player base on Steam. Not only did it come across as super scummy, and those level modification and gauntlet stuff, it also needs credence to the idea that they were running out of money to monetize early access. This was confusing to many fans such as myself, as I was wondering why did a free-to-play game have an early access that was paid? But like with the Kickstarter and their Ultimate Editions, Frostgiant was promising that early supporting would be rewarded and you would end up with a better deal in the end. If only that was ultimately true, unintended. Frostgiant seemed more focused on business-related activities and than putting in the groundwork to build their game. That's how I felt, and I rarely talk about my feelings. At least that's what my therapist said. I mean, this game was set to launch in a year, and they barely just introduced their third faction. And not only was it not done, it was hilariously
Get better at
overpowered
using
testing
that
when it was
the
introduced.
dash thing.
To the point that I don't even know how they couldn't balance the basics of that. And the other two factions weren't done either. The game terminating currently at Tier 3, but realistically Tier 2 with how slim pickings Tier 3 was. But anyway, the third faction was announced, the Celestials faction. This faction copied aspects of the Protoss with a technical focus and lasers and stuff, but honestly played quite different. which might have made them a little bit more of a struggle to balance. But at least they were taking a risk. They could actually move their main base, had aligned builders, and had a strong unit focus still seen. While the Infernals were Zerg-like, as I stated, and utilized their fast-moving cheap units to pressure the map and creep, Vanguard was terrible, being quite well-rounded, and allowing for arguably the most inspiring games. Celestials were the most useful, and with that came an interesting balancing process. They were in many ways a more advanced Protoss, which seemed to be kind of interesting, whereas the other two factions are pretty cookie-cutter copies, which is a shame. I think the Celestials show that the team had at least some creativity, even though their entrance into the world is not explained. I would have liked to see them lean more into that with the other two factions. Though I say some because I don't get why the Celestials are still even so standard ground unit focused. I thought they would add some cool things later on, like the Carnivex, which is pretty cool, but I don't necessarily know if it fits as a Celestial. We have to talk about something, and that's appealing to super niche or competitive fans of a game. It's just usually a foolhardy thing, and I said some of that as well. Why was a game like this already so much more focused on competition, including in balance, before they were even close to launch? I mentioned this in my StarCraft 2 video, but despite StarCraft 2 being built for esports in many ways, StarCraft 1, in the end, had a much longer and more popular overall esports success. That's because the game wasn't made for competition. It was adaptive. There's a difference. Players built their own maps, turning systems, and even competition. This drove StarCraft to become a national sport video game in Korea, which still reigns on a top 10 list for Stormgate had seemingly fallen into the same problem as StarCraft. This wasn't totally surprising given the fact that the game had at least a dozen of the same bugs. But probably since they never meant to be done, they had built the game for competition. Slowly how everything sounded first. StarCraft 2 didn't even launch with a full custom system or co-op. Stormgate could have done that better. Could have been early access was the different thing, we didn't even have the big world and success that was lean on like StarCraft 2. The challenge was we had at the time too, was just absolutely insane but at the fall. Nor did they have the actual experience of proper support, even outside of monetary. Deciding to go after the smallest part of the audience, I say that was not easy. Because it means you're only looking to slice the smallest piece of the pie, which are the biggest parts of the RTS audience. The biggest piece of the pie, shock you, but it's the single part. Hell, I played more Age of Empires 2 all the way to 4 against the CPUs more than I played against actual players, especially due to the scenarios in those games. But this is proven by looking at the sales of the most popular RTS games, and looking at how many players even go online, let alone play consistently. You realize this genre is sold largely on flavor, the strength of the campaign, AI scenarios, AI, and custom game options, things that Stormgate was lacking. Early access early backers release would happen July 30th, 2024, and if you are as confused by that sentence as I was, we're in good company, or bad, or whatever. Early backer meant for people who essentially pre-ordered a free game that would grant them some benefits, such as playing earlier. The problem with this was that many players were confused as to when the actual FTP launch or free-to-play launch was supposed to come. And also doing it this way puts another paywall on your content. Not that people have barely gotten the chance to even test in the testing phase. The thing with feedback is you get a lot of it, and most of it is trash, and has to be discarded. The other not-so-trash stuff has to be parsed. The rest is the good stuff. But that stuff's rare in my experience as a QA tester for 15 years. But it must be dealt with, because if you don't deal with it, you will be slow to address the concerns that plague your player base. The key, though, is not losing your sight on your own vision, even with the input from the outside. The early input I had myself and saw repeated for Stormgate was wrong, much like the closed beta I already experienced. It was worrying for me when the game was set to launch rather soon. Early access or not, that practice actually stopped your game from being taken seriously as a product whenever you actually charge people for things. Especially when you already had that level of money involved and crowdfunding. Stormgate felt like a pared-down version of Warcraft 3, and that game launched over 20 years ago. That's not a bar you should be unable to beat or pass in terms of like pure feature set. Worse, the game in early access still looked worse than StarCraft 2 did in Alpha. And worse isn't just about shiny graphics and nice-looking things. It's about having distinctive looks and memorable looks. And it's not like Frost Giant could just throw more money at the problem. In fact, it turns out, according to a dedicated Redditor detective, that they were running out of money based on their projections. This would target them to run out of money in the spring of 2025, which doesn't totally seem out of the question, especially with what we know later on. That's why it's a dangerous gambit to be blowing through millions before you've even had your foundation solidly placed and figured out. But as you will see later on, the problem usually comes from the top. And in in the case of Stormgate, leadership were making questionable decisions and leading the game into a questionable direction. A few months would pass and the actual free-to-play early access launch would drop for Stormgate, August 13th, 2024, launching the game on Steam officially. Stormgate would manage to score a 62% score on Steam, giving it some mixed reviews. But first, let's cover the critical reception before going back to the player base. Critical reception for Stormgate was interesting, starting with IGN, and the same writer I just criticized regarding a tepid BTMP2 or Masquerade Bloodlines 2
Damn
review
it.
without much substance to it. IGN would state that Stormgate was what was next, and then preface it with, well, they hope it is. What kind of critical voice is that? How would you publish that? Then they talk about how the game is very StarCraft 2 or Warcraft 3, yet lacks the budget and features of those games. There's also no mention about how much content is actually missing. Rank 2v2, 3v3, and 4v4 period. Wasn't this supposed to be a social-focused game? Where was the custom games or custom game making? Anyway, IGN would finish their review with a 7 out of 10, stating that the game still had miles to go, but pushes the classic RTS formula forward. I'm sorry, I just don't see how. Even if it was good at what it does and did, which was arguable, and I will argue that in a second, what new and innovative does Stormgate even bring? Camps already existed in Warcraft, towers existed in StarCraft, etc. The Escapist would give us a much more realistic review, claiming that the game is so bare bones and the campaign was not personally investment worthy at all. Day 9, who is a big name in the RTS community, especially StarCraft, who did some promotional reviews of the game, called the game a 1 or 2 out of 10, a totally abysmal score, claiming that it was really unfinished in all aspects of the game, campaign, PvP, factions, you know. Tier 3 was also missing in Celestial's work, that work-in-progress faction. More complaints would be echoed from the player base, myself including the fact that the cinematics in the game were just totally lackluster, and that's me being nice, especially from the expectations that were set from the initial announcement trailer. Worse, the overall visuals in the game were totally forgettable, including a total boring and dull map environment behind it. The new models on the units were not really impressive for an Unreal Engine 5 game either, looking less distinctive and having less distinct visuals, including the particle effects than games from 20 years before. The early access thing was a gamble, and seemingly only a gamble made purely from a monetization or money perspective. That's because Blizzard, which you guys should know, as ex-developers of Blizzard, created magic with some of these games by having extensive testing periods. Sure, they had way more money to do that than you, but you knew that already. Why spend money on frivolous things like focusing on a game's competition scene early on, when it lacked basic game modes? And why showcase yourself so much and ask for more funding when you don't even have something to prove it? Meaning your product can't prove what you're actually preaching. You lack basic game modes and have this totally mediocre campaign. These things are more important than the competition scene and everything else. Doubly more important than trying to go after so many creators, especially totally random ones like Aspen. How on earth is that the best mouthpiece for the game? A genre he doesn't even understand. There's probably like a dozen smaller creators from the RTS world that not ready to do this. And there was just so much money for this. The studio was in Orange County, California, where average developers are making like nearly 6 figures or more. Though I hear that many from the company work from home. And was it even being spent in the right places, all this money? Imagine that as developers or investment funding pushing things to the line and being the culprit here. But regardless, once you have a poor review on Steam, early access or not, people form this dark cloud which surrounds your game. They get its word-of-mouth referrals, harming its community and players, and even badmouth the game further than that to keep players further away, truth or not. Things, unfortunately, would only get worse when a slew of drama would start spewing from Frostgiant, likely not helping their already struggling early access title either. For example, there's a strong hunch from some Reddit detectives that Tim Morton, the production guy turned CEO of the company, you guys know how much I love that, had a sock puppet account and was keeping his identity hidden. Seriously. Apparently someone named Void Legacy had been posting in defense of the company for a while, and this person is heavily rumored to be the CEO of the company. How unprofessional, totally cringe, and honestly totally RTS. Worse, Tim Morton would come out to address the concerns of the game, while basically missing them in the same token, even going as far to be mocking about people who are trying to give up, some advice and stuff like that. Now, there's a slew of bodies and cases I've already investigated, where the culprit largely is a producer from a large company who has some success. A typical role player in the company, just doing their thing, now having this massive amount of influence and wielding it questionably. There's not a lot to be impressed by when it comes to Tim Morton and his whole handling of Stormgate. more drama would spring up, as apparently Frost Giant had been creating fake reviews. There were some strong accusations that were backing this up. In time for a Steam sale, apparently some actual developers at Frost Giant were leaving phony reviews, some without even having enough playtime to have a proper review, making it even more obvious. Tim Morton himself was reportedly a part of this, and yet took the time to insult people trying to understand the game's shaky direction. Look, Frost Giant theoretically had some time, with the full release of the game set to launch later in the year. But with how things have already been fumbled, would players even come back to the game that lacked more personality than an Unreal Engine community project? With this over-competitive focus of the game made worse by the fact that the only thing in the game was 1v1 essentially, it was turning players off hard as the player base would drop to just 200 players. It's nearly impossible to play a game as a new player when a player base is in the low thousands, as StarCraft 2 has already largely achieved. If it wasn't for co-op and mostly custom games and custom campaigns, StarCraft 2 wouldn't even have a population comparable to indie titles today. Stormgate had some co-op, but lacked mostly everything else. So its first impressions for players was that it was objectively worse than the other game that they were coming from, or that this game had just been compared to. It means you just pissed off a ton of nerds, and trust me, you don't want to do that. I know what that's like. The visual upgrade would happen for the game spring 2025, and although there were some quality upgrades here, at least by comparison, that's the problem. They were working with dirt before, so prettying up dirt isn't that much prettier. I mean, compare this to Tempest Rising, a game that had way less of a budget, and their game looks way better and more distinctive. Look, I haven't seen anyone wax poetic about Stormgate's art. It's heavily criticized by players and critics alike. That means that your art team just didn't work. You either get rid of most of them, or try to bring in a new team to bring in some light. Hire another developer as a third-party artist, or just accept that the game isn't going to work. Because having charming art styles and memorable character models is what makes an RTS game a great one. And when that much money is involved, you kind of need a great one. Think of the Monkey Unit in Age of Empires, the Vultures in StarCraft 1, the Flyers in Warcraft 3. All of these have distinct visuals, gameplay styles, and personalities, and obviously, mechanically, usages at certain times of the game. They even have these fun and interesting and very character-related quips that when you click on them, they're so memorable I can say most of them by heart.
I read you,
So,
I read you, sir.
you get the idea. Stormgate, even with these new visuals, was lacking that soul. A proper world and lore built from them, where the art system interacts and complements it. And, characters throughout the world, whether through things like quips, also just bring some levity. And levity is important in such a game. These things just feel so disconnected in Stormgate. Even the hero units are totally forgettable. These were moments that Stormgate could have focused on.
Oh, you can't go through it like that, okay.
Moments that players like myself, back from the Peons in Warcraft 2, expected. Yes, sir. Yes, boss. These are non-negotiable. Instead, we have this mechanically decent husk of a game that doesn't make you want to come back for more unless you just feel like going hard in the paint. They could have just decided to build this really mechanical game that lacked everything else, and then people would have still been impressed and ready to see more. Instead, they tried to build the whole game and failed. Early on, Stormgate talked about making a game that worked in team play as well, and was more balanced there. Something that was kind of lacking in RTS games. Instead, we have a game in 2025 that still doesn't have a 3v3 mode or more. These false promises, Stormgate would finally drop their alpha June 2025, in time for the upcoming full release. Where was this particular piece of content, and why wasn't it a #1 priority? Think about it. You could have had people building maps for you for 3 years. Imagine how good they could have gotten. I mean, even just recently when they released the Monkey editor and everything else, someone made a fully functional mode. Imagine if that was someone's first experience. Now you have less than 70 players on average playing the game. And you can't give them tools after they've already done. And you only kind of give them tools because the trigger system wasn't even fully implemented. I think StarCraft 2 had a lazy presence that actually lacked the proper editor at launch, and also lacked the just because their game was polished. They would still eventually though end up with some great custom maps, whether arcade style or not. Custom maps that Stormgate's devs could have ideas. More game modes or custom games themselves. There's just a general lack of care and thought in discussing the actions of Frost Giant in relation to the player base and their desires for the game. And if a company is continuing to be disconnected like that for long, and already blowing through all their money, it's not going to end well. Everything was riding on the full release of the game, which took place August 5th, 2025. While many took it easy on Stormgate the first time around, I think many more would actually call the game out for what it was at this point. A tepid upgrade from what existed before, especially with so much lacking in the game. Was it even an upgrade? It didn't have modes and certain mechanics that already existed and were expected. Well, there's always one exception. Yep, you guessed it. It's another IGN review from the same writer who would rate the game higher at 8 out of 10. State that Stormgate still has a long road ahead of it, but it's already a special game, combining the familiar and fresh into a satisfying RTS experience. They would then proceed to repeat their top point. And no, I'm not kidding. It's the same words. How on earth are you rating this game an 8 and in the same breath claiming it's a much improved game as if it's still not good enough? Because you even then admit that the road ahead is still long. This is just like insane glazery. Meanwhile, read the recent player reviews. They're anything but glazy and present real criticism, such as how the game originally charged for a $40 Kickstarter that would give you the Ultimate Edition, and then dropped another, more jam-packed edition on Steam at release. This made many OG supporters feel cheated, and understandably so, especially when you had to purchase the new campaign anyway, even if you previously backed the game. There was just no respect for the audience here.
I didn't realize that was going in the background. My bad, guys. Just listening to stuff about games. Bad guys. shit. Oh shit. I'm gonna die. I don't think I was supposed to fall off that. Okay. Well, this is a little lame. This looks like, this just looks bad. Hey, there's my horse. Are you not entertained?
You disappoint me, horseman. You look quite small from up here.
You can look me in the eye when I kill you.
Let's see how you fare, horseman. With only 2 legs to carry you.
shit. No! Good God, dude. I can't fucking get away from his shit. What the fuck?
What do you think you're doing? That thing's lost its mind. Kill it! Enough, I said. Finish it!
Ruin. I won't fight you.
You fool! I order you to break that night.
And if I refuse, you'll kill me. I'll take my chances.
Are you not entertained?
Oh, really?
Your little reunion brings a tear to my eye. This might be a way of finding the stitch.
Did I go the wrong way? God damn it. Oh, you gotta be on the horse? Okay, you gotta be on the horse. Alright.
Done. But that was only practice for the Stygian, the biggest and meanest of them all.
Vulcan, what you got, dude? You gotta have something new, right?
See anything you like. Oh, you like that? You are as wise as you are powerful. You drive too hard a bargain, friend. An excellent choice. See anything you like. You are as wise. Did you come all this way to waste my time? You drive too hard a bargain, friend. You are as wise as you are powerful. You are as wise as you are powerful.
Gotta get his heart out somehow, right? Cut it out from the inside. Uh-huh.
I guess there's nothing left to do but get the Stygian's heart back to Samael. Still, all these hearts, the power you'll get from them. I hope you know what you're doing.
One more. Just one more. And then more. You get your tower. Silith's web-infested lair is far across the great chasm in the Ashlands. Ruin has yet to regain much of his strength, but he will make the distance. As for Silitha, just get there, and she'll find you. The Broodmother is a collector of sorts. Most who enter her realm, she feeds to her young, the ones she takes an interest in. Those are the unlucky ones. Those she keeps alive, and they can live a long time. Long enough to tell her things. You could say she collects stories, information.
What stories will she tell me about you, Samael?
Careful, or your ending will be a tragic one. Sometimes the hero dies in the end. But Horseman, I like stories that have a happy ending. Now bring me the final heart.
The hell? What was that? Oh, I got the dodge in the air now.
Who can stand against you?
Oh, God. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this section. I didn't... Honestly, we got through that part faster than I was expecting. I figured we'd be there a little bit. That really wasn't a dungeon, now, was it? It was more of like just environmental stuff. Boss was rather easy. But anyway, we'll be back tomorrow with, going after, what's her name? Looks like a big fucking spider. So, anyway, appreciate you guys hanging out for this one. Still got plenty more Darksiders to go. You guys come back. We'll see you later.